Hello, everybody, and welcome to Water Cooler Gossip Q&A on 6++. It's a lunchtime. It's a Monday. We've done a couple of these now. People have been really up for it, so we're back once again. And it's myself and the lovely Ed today. Edward, how are you?
All the better for hearing your voice as usual, Tom.
Yeah, you cutie, you little flirt.
Got to flirt with you, man.
We've been flirting all weekend. We're not going to stop now.
It's true.
We're
It's
having
true.
a good time. Having a good time.
Vibes.
So, obviously, we have just got back from the biggest team tournament. Biggest one. A tournament so big it didn't fit in a single hall, did it?
It didn't. I didn't. I only found out at the end of the two that there was another hall. I just thought I was just missing people as usual. I was like, there's another hall. Oh, that's where you guys have been. I thought we had two more teams.
This was in Coventry in a big old leisure centre. They had two sports halls because they had 141 teams playing, which is a bonkers amount of people, right? That's huge. Obviously, 5-man teams, and we were actually nagging Zach to hopefully do 8-man in the future in the UK because that'd be amazing to see. I think that'd be really cool.
Well, I'm going to try and do it myself at some stage as well.
Yes, absolutely. So it's very, very exciting. Ed obviously runs his events in Cardiff out of Firestorm.
Really shout
crazy
out.
Wolves Gaming, yeah, absolutely. And so the teams was really, really booming, which has been really, really exciting to see. So obviously, what we're going to be doing today is, I think, we're going to try and be zoomed out. We've got the captains of all the 6++ teams on the show Tuesday night talking about the runs of the different teams. Now, obviously, Ed and I can talk a little bit about our experiences in here and share some funny stories, all that good stuff. Especially Ed, because you'll want to hear what Ed's been up to with his Imperial Fist Ultramarine nonsense. His insanity. But I think going in, I wouldn't have said we had sort of a perfect fix on what the state of the team's meta was and what the things were in play. And obviously that we had so many rules changes after Grotmas and everything else that it was a bit of a wild west. But there were definitely patterns and interesting things that are worth picking up on, I think, from the event. And I'm very curious to see what Ed's kind of zoomed out take on it is. I've got some ideas myself, and we certainly felt as we were going through the games, we were learning a lot about what the kind of teams comp might be in the UK, especially on those boards at the moment. With their light boards and their heavy boards and all the different things.
Imagine getting a light board.
Yeah, the only time we got a light board, we used it to make my score worse, which is great. Yeah. That was good fun. Thanks.
We just didn't use it well.
Thanks, Harley, for that. Wherever you are, obviously, do shout us out in the chat. Let us know what you're up to. Were you at ITT? How'd it go for you guys? We'd love to hear from you. And obviously, from the self-promotional side, please do hit the old like and subscribe. Leave us a comment.
We love it.
And support us as a YouTube member, as someone had already done. Looking at the chat earlier on, that's wonderful. That helps support the channel and keep everything growing as well. And we'll have a little break midway through as well, so that Ed can promote some exciting new ventures he's got going on, and chat all things exciting future news for the Plus as well. But let's start with the overall outcomes, right? So if we're thinking about the ITT itself, it was pretty stacked. There were some very strong teams there.
Yeah, deceptively so. Normally there's two teams who are fighting for the win, and then all of us sort of turn up in between and go, we're gonna draw with you, and then we don't draw with them, and then we go.
We were so close. So close.
Yeah, and then even this time, even you look at other teams that have already come, they've come back with a brand new team and a brand new outlook and a brand new comp, like Vanguard Tactics with two or three new players.
I think it was two. So Aiden, who's in the chat, hi Aiden, and Mike Porter. So they had a very strong lineup this time.
Yeah, so their lineup obviously was. Well, I think probably their comp was very good. They have some really good factions and faction specialists as well.
Yes.
So I think that really did testament to them because they got to the final. So I think even when it comes down to the teams that are already going, you're not just seeing this new strong teams coming in. You're also seeing the teams that are already there stepping up their game,
leveling up. Yeah, exactly.
It's also like our comp. We've tried to bring in CSM to try and give us some more combat pressure and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see. So I like the way it's going. We've got more teams coming in, stronger teams coming in, and the teams already there are a step leveling up. And you can see it across the board. Like probably look at 2 years ago, if you went to a team event, half the teams you played didn't know how to pair. They didn't even know. Yeah. They were like, do I put a defender down or do I attack? Yeah. And they didn't even know what Matrix was. The concept of it was alien to them. But nowadays, every team's like, I've got a Matrix, we've got our pairing cards, we know exactly how to pair. You see every single team that you play will know exactly what they're going to be doing with their pairers and how to plan going in. Yes. It's obviously a very different dynamic to where it used to be 2 years ago, which is great.
Wildly different. Yeah, it's exciting, but it is wildly different. I was talking to some lads in the pub on the Friday night, and it was their first ever teams event, right? Yes. And I was like, how have you guys prepped? And they're like, we've done a Matrix, we've looked at 70 teams.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the first one they've ever done.
Yeah,
It's
and
completely wild.
and even the teams that you'd play, that like like, there was no given round, because any team could just get you on pairings if you disrespect them. So like,
Completely.
because if you disrespect what they're going to do, I guarantee, especially the top team going into it, like I was, well, we were considered on stat check, so I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. If you look at it like, especially as a top team going in, you've got to understand that every team that you're going to play has either looked at you before the round has started or already planned to play you. So if you disrespect a team or disrespect a round, they'll outpair you and they'll beat your ass or draw you.
Exactly that. I think that was exactly right. And we found that a lot in pairings where ultimately we had to take some hits. There wasn't even the rounds which were into less familiar or experienced teams, for example.
Yeah.
The comp was still good enough and some of this scary enough that it was like, well, one of us is taking a hit here or we're not getting through the round, right? And I think that's all credit to the community itself for all its enthusiasm. I think the fact that these are more standardized, this is the UKTC effect to an extent, right? You know the deal with it because it's the same again and again. It helps people get familiar, and that actually strengthens the whole player base, which is something we've seen in singles over the years as well, right? Singles players have gradually leveled up.
100%. It's both ways. Like back in the day, like 2-3 years ago, if you're a top player going into an event, you'd have like one tough game before the 5-0, and then you'd be playing with the tough players and thing. That's how it used to be. Whereas now it's like, Jesus, I'm playing like 4 games of Warhammer. Sometimes 5. I'm like, everyone's gotten so much better. And it's, it's a testament to, like, I think a big thing that's about that is we've got a lot more competitive content creators, which are received really, really well. And obviously they focus on what they do a lot more. So it's really good though, because it means that you've got like a more people leveling up the game all the time. And if you look at our community as a general consensus compared to, like, let's say America and stuff like that, or like compared to other countries, our meta is so focused on the terrain you've got that you've got you've got consistent leveling up of people and people who are going to get better because they've got consistency of terrain and events every month, which is really good.
100%. Yeah, completely. And so obviously, I mean, if we're thinking about the outcomes, the result of this was, and I think when you've got 5 rounds in a final, you have, I think there's probably 12, 13 teams that have a good shot of making it all the way up into those later rounds, right?
I'd say so.
And actually, ultimately, it comes down to the runs and the combinations, right? So, these events have historically been very dominated by England adjacent teams or Ignite. Yeah, and in this particular run, both those teams hit really tough rounds and drew, which ultimately then takes them out of the contention. Exactly, which I think is really cool. And I think I saw a very fun game going on between the Ignite guys, and it was a mix of French and Belgian players who'd come over. Team No Name, they were a very strong team.
They were a very strong team,
right? Very strong team.
I was very glad not to all. I would like to play some of the experience. However, no, not for my sanity or mental health.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Go that one.
And they, they gave Ignite an absolute run, and that was a draw where I think Ignite was scrapping on the other side of the draw, really, with some of those players. So that's incredibly exciting, and I think it's worth shouting out having those international teams coming over. There was Norway there, Romania was there, France was there. It's amazing. We love that. I think having those massive events where we've got the international players coming over and wanting to be part of it is really, really exciting. So in this instance, that meant that Vanguard went through and played the final against Mind Goblins, who I think knocked out their own second team in the final round.
They played each other.
So Vanguard obviously taking us down by a point. God damn it, Steve. Stop it, Steve. Leave us alone.
Stop playing good Warhammer, Steve. It makes it harder for
you. Every single time.
To be fair, they all did great.
They did.
We had two big results against us, which then we were trying to scrap for the draw. I managed to beat Ben in the mirror.
Yes, you did. Yes,
for a stroke of luck, and I cheated heroic. And also I had just one turn where everything went great, but we'll go on to that in another video or another time. Just break down specific games. But yeah, it's one of those things where we were scrapping for points in between, and also our matrix wasn't great into the Vanguard guys going into it. We had I think we had out of 25 potential pairings, I think a minimum 17 were ambers or reds. And we were that's not ideal.
Part of that, I think part of that was the unknown factor. And that's one thing I actually think Vanguard do really well is they always bring something. And certainly Steve especially. Steve works really hard to have something people do not fully understand or
I respect
know, right?
I respect
because obviously he had the He had the different sisters list, like Army of Faith last time, which would again completely threw me with some of the stuff it could do. He had a very infantry and Venatari Custodes list, which people are not thinking about. Everyone's thinking about the Dreadnoughts, and so yeah, I think all credit to them. And I think Steve finished the top scorer at the event. You weren't far off though, Ed. You did very well as well.
That's all right.
But Steve absolutely smashed people. So Vanguard lost by a point, the reverse, to Mind Goblins in the final. So just to take you through the pairings, we had Porter drawing with Eddie Cheta. So that's GSC Votan on a 10-10. So that's a draw. Louis Ballington beats Ben Jones in the Marines mirror. So Ben Jones not handling his Marines mirrors this weekend. Poor guy. Had a rough time, I think, in a couple of those.
He went second. He went first against being taken hold as well, which makes him massive.
And that's a big deal, right? Absolutely. And then Stephen Box continuing doing what he's doing, absolutely shellacking Orcs with his Custodes, 18-2. Mike Costello goes down to the Admech. Johnny Simmons with his surprise factor Admech, always a useful tool for the Mind Goblins.
Hero, that man.
Yeah, I know. What a legend. Beating Mike there 14-6. And Aidan Smalley losing to Don Medlow's Astraminatarum 16-4. So obviously, Aidan had a fantastic weekend, played really well. This one's obviously gone against him. I'm sure Aidan in the chat will have his own account of what went down. But that's obviously, there's a lot of gun in that Minatarum list. So I can see why, if you start losing tanks too soon, get a bit unpleasant.
If the connect turn goes off with that bridgehead, it'll pick up 800 points, and then you can't kill enough back, and then it's just they start uppy downy, and it just rapidly goes down the other way.
Absolutely. So yeah, all credit to Mind Goblins. That's a fantastic, really grindy, narrow result. And again, you've got Steve getting a huge score in there. So if you're overturning that and winning the round, I think you've done really well. That's a really, really impressive performance from them. I'm sure we'll get the blow by blow on all of that in the future on other content. So that's exciting because I think the thing with UK teams is that for a little while, and probably a little bit with singles, it felt a little bit like a sort of Ignite England kind of closed shop, right? So I think it's really healthy that it's opening up a bit. I think it's awesome that you see other teams in contention. I think the game being so much more balanced and so much closer means that those draws or those close rounds are really, really likely. Now, I was looking at the runs that all the big teams went on. They all had to just get by a couple of times into really tough stuff. So I don't know about you, Ed, but it feels very exciting and very daunting to try and win teams events right now.
It's everyone's annoyingly good at Warhammer nowadays. Like it's making our jobs very hard, and it's also fantastic. But yeah, it's hard. It's much harder to win a tournament now, especially like on Scorched. You get that with a mission like Scorched Earth, or for example, if you play Linchpin. Not that it's that event, but if you play Linchpin at some point, and you're like, the entire team's gone first. Well, push, boys, let's go.
Yeah,
let's go. That's the only thing we got.
And that's where the missions have a big impact, as you say. And I think we felt that in several rounds where the first, second patterns have a big impact on the scores.
Yeah,
and ultimately you're trying to push to overturn those, but that adds risk as well. So there's a lot of challenges with doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also it's like on Burden of Trust, I went first, and I was like, oh no. But I played against Votan, and he put a lot of stuff into reserve, and I was like, yeet, and just ran to try and get a big score, and it worked. It sometimes does, sometimes doesn't, but it worked that time. So I'll take that.
Exactly. My Bile opponent was in the reverse position, and he's sort of half sent. His problem was that he hadn't. I think he'd left a brick of possessed in reserves. We were chatting afterwards. I was like, if one of your two plans is to send, just have it on the board and send. Don't be like, I'll send, and then another bit will come in turn 2 off the board. It's like, that's not helping you, right? That's not going to work.
Yeah,
you need to go.
Yeah, the only two things that were in my deployment zone was 5 intercessors, a Gravis captain, and 5 Dessos. That's it.
Yeah. If you are sending. You said
everything was out.
Exactly right. All right, we'll just engage with the chat. We've got Aidan, and again, shout out to Aidan. Fantastic. I really liked your Death Guard list. He's quoting it. Aidan, I need to bust you so that I can face Orcs. Yes, boss. Aidan taking his job like a champion there.
Yeah.
John C asked, did you run rounds 1-5 from the UK TC mission pack, or do they do something different in teams? At the moment, it's the same, right? It's the same as the singles pack.
Yeah.
I think you could make the case that it would be cool if the teams pack was different to the singles pack. I don't know what you feel, Ed. Like 1 or 2 missions, swap it around a bit. Why not?
I think that would mean that you'd have to put the effort into making another terrain pack, and that would be awful for him, right? I'm a Theo. I sympathise. No, I agree. It'd be really nice if there was some differences with the singles, maybe even changing up the missions and stuff. Because like just getting rid of Burden of Trust is a general idea, but that's just my opinion. But I think mixing it up would be cool for singles and teams. I think that would be a nice thing to do. But also remember the whole reason why Well, not the whole reason. One of the contributing factors is the reason why everyone's been getting so good and the community's been building and everyone's been there so much is because of the consistency.
That's
So
a very reasonable, empathetic point, Ed. That I'm going to have to agree with you on.
Yeah. So from Zach's perspective, he's been doing what he's been doing. He's been consistent and it's working. So why would he change it?
No,
completely.
So actually, realistically, we want that grindy, difficult, everyone's up to speed feeling, and actually it's having the overlap is probably what's produced that.
Yeah, exactly. It also makes the entry level less. So do you know what I mean? Like if you've got an entry level that people come in at and they're starting tournaments and they've got a terrain pack and they've been to 3 events in 3 months and they've seen it and they get up to speed with it, that's less daunting whenever they go to new events. I think it's also easy
that's completely fair.
And also because the UKTC is so accessible, and if the mission's changed quite often, then TTS wouldn't be able to date, and then people who use TTS wouldn't be able to access it unless you've got, the links to be able to do and all that sort of thing. So I think for me, having that consistency is nice, just to be able to have people have an entry level to come in, which is nice.
That's completely fair. No, completely reasonable. And I actually think probably the arguments against going towards 8s are similar, just because. And I was chatting with Zach about it. It's like it might be cool to do one 8-man big UKTC event in a year, just so that all those people that really love the full WTC style 8-mans can get involved and whatever else. But actually, if you're newer and you're trying to find your mates to go to a teams event, 5 is already, quite the undertaking, and getting 5 people up to speed and along. And you do want to leave it at a level that people can get involved. And 8-man's probably, at the moment, we're probably not quite there where, anyone who wants to get along can find 7 other people that will play 8-mans and understand that.
No, I would agree. I think it's. I think having 8-man is one of those events that you have to you basically have to have the teams that you're going to come already planned for. Yes. I mean, you just kind of have to know where they're going to be. Like, I'm going to be doing an 8-man next year. I think I'm going to be doing my first. Like a 400 man. That's the idea. But that's the idea. But with the 8-mans, I'm going to basically it's going to be invitational, effectively. It's going to be there's going to be 50 teams that I know who they're all going to be. And there's going to be an 8-man from each one. Like, it's going to be different international teams and all that sort of thing. And then you'll have ultimately, I'm only actually selling 5 or 6 spots. And that's the way you have to be. And if Zach having to do that he'd probably be able to do it. But it's just whether he'd want to put
it's as you say. It's not the same. Yeah, I think it sounded like one day he might look at it, but I agree. I think it's a very different thing. And it's what you don't want to do is turn people off teams just as it's really, really gathering, momentum, right?
Exactly.
So we've got a few shout outs. So Boa Calder in the chat says, I'd love to try a teams tournament, but it makes me nervous. Oh man. Right. So Boa Calder, once you get your head around it, actually teams in some ways can be very relaxing. Yeah. Because I think the best thing about it is that every single round, even if you lose, it's all there to play for. And it's, your team can continue rolling on through. It's not just completely the luck of the draw in terms of what you happen to get paired into. You've got a bit of say and agency in that. And if you are going into something difficult, you've chosen it. I think it takes a bit of getting used to that pressure of, what's happening is contingent on other people. Sometimes it's out of your hands. That's one thing that can be really uncomfortable. If you're in a bad match, I had the first 2 rounds, I was in bad matchups. You've then got that horrible feeling of, I just hope everyone else gets it done. That does feel a little bit. I mean, having Ed on the team helps because you're like, well, I know Ed will get it done.
We don't someone, it's fine.
But that does take a bit of getting used to. But I think it's well worth it. I strongly encourage you to give it a go. And obviously, when you're first trying it, you can just have fun with your mates as well. It doesn't need to be much pressure whilst you figure it out. I think there's plenty of teams just going for a laugh as well. So.
It's also surrounding. You got to remember, there's 700 people there, or was it something like that? I can't remember how many it was, but it's meant to be 700 people there. So if you're looking at let's say there's 700 people at the event, right, and that breaks down to 140 something teams. Do you really think 140 teams are taking it seriously to the point that they're going to win? No, probably looking at more like 10. You've got all these teams below who are turning up for vibes. You've got a team called Hawaii 05. You know what I mean? You don't need to be going for these sorts of, you don't have to go with this mentality of I'll do the best I can and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, wanting to do the best you can and playing the best you can for sure. But that doesn't mean you don't. That doesn't mean you have to feel nervous or pressured to perform in a certain way, especially when you've got the correct people around you. Like when I first started to do team events, I messed up rounds. I made mistakes that cost us the round. But when that happens, you just go, well, I've learned this from the game. This is really cool. And as long as you just got to surround yourself with people who aren't going to punish you for it. because they're the
Exactly.
worst people to be on a team with.
Exactly. I was gonna say, that's one thing Alfaris has really got down now is, whenever we learn lessons, it's a lesson for next time. It's never like, oh, this is a disaster right now. Whenever we do have setbacks, like, okay, well, actually, the useful lesson here is next time we can do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it's very much no one is ever taking the fall or the blame in the moment for a situation.
Yeah,
it's just not useful. No one needs that, right? If you've lost a game, it's already happened. There's no point, right?
If you blame someone and they feel more pressure to do the next to get a better score,
it just doesn't.
Then just play stupid. You know what I mean? You don't want that. Especially if you've got like a stable player who always gets 10s. Let's say they have a blowout and get a 1. Or let's say, if you suddenly like rinse them for it and make them feel bad about it, blah, 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 the next time they'll be like, I've got to win this one, and they'll just do stupid plays and they can get a worse score. So this whole mentality of punishing players on your team but like messing up something is really toxic and really bad. And you shouldn't do it.
It's not useful. Exactly that.
I can't remember the team, but we played one once in Element Games. And they had a lot. I was like, we saw this score with your Eldar into whatever it was. I don't know what the pairings were. And they went, oh yeah, don't worry, we chatted to him about that. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And then our own team told them off. They were just like, well, don't like rinse your player like that. There's no need.
It's not going to help, is it?
Exactly.
It's not going to help.
Especially when you've got like a lot of casual people who are trying to get into teams. Like imagine if you were the sub who just wants to get into teams, and a team does that, so you'll never go back. And we don't want that.
Completely.
We want everyone to join in teams. It's going to be awesome.
Completely. I've got a few more shouts in the chat. Our very own Aaron Wilson's in. Lovely to hear from you, Aaron. I hope you're doing well. Josh Callum was saying, difference between now and a year ago for teams is wild. Everyone rocking up with the Matrix plan lineup. Yeah, exactly. It's like laptops or iPads. Everyone's got them. Everyone's looking at your Matrix. Everyone's got that plan now. There is a lot less random pairing, although I believe, I can't remember, one of our teams did play into random pairings at the end and lose, I think, but I can't remember. I can't remember which of our teams it was. But there's nothing more dangerous than random pairings, guys.
You end up playing
some shout outs. Apparently, the mission 6 is quite difficult and a bit rough. Aiden found that a bit rough. I've heard this before about current new KTC pack, but I'm not an expert on it. I don't know.
Is it Hammer and Anvil? 6 objective. Yeah,
I think it might be Hammer and Anvil. Yeah, I think that's right.
It's a guard.
Hammer 6 objective terraform. Oh,
Jesus.
6 objective terraform is bonkers. I mean, I would love that. I can throw a GSC army at you and just terraform the entire midboard.
Man, Aiden, I'm so proud of your form, mate. Honestly, I think that's amazing.
Vicious.
To be honest, I think that's amazing.
That is
oh god, that's awful. I'd hate to play guard into that. That'd be
terrible. 100%. Donald Cowie asks, how do you handle team events when new codex is released weekend or 2 beforehand? I think there's like a 2-week window, right? I think if it's not out a couple of weeks before, it's just not in. So we didn't have new guard or new Eldar or anything at this event. It was sort of a taster of Grokmas, but before these new books arrived, which I think is interesting in and of itself. But I think it's fair to say Eldar and Guard will change that. We'll have their say on that.
Eldar will.
Yeah. Purge the Foe is awful for some armies. Pancakes, don't I know it? This is what I say. We'll talk about our armies and our feeling in a moment, but I think that's the last event I'm going to with the boys where I just have to have my hand up in round 2 and just go, sorry guys, I just don't win this game. Unfortunately, I just don't have the army that does that unless I get a tabling. And so I think it's a deliberate comp choice. It hurts certain kinds of builds over others. I don't mind it. I think it's okay. But I think building with that in mind though is a big deal.
But in our build especially, I could play Purge because I didn't direct.
Yeah.
So it's like it's fine. I should get a big win in Purge. You should get a less
exactly
win.
that.
Balance it out.
Exactly that. And so it's having people to cover you. I think that's the thing. So like doing GSC is obviously the example here. It's like in Purge the Foe, it's like unless I go second and play very, very well, it should be a 7 or an 8, right? And I managed to get a hold more turn 5 against Death Guard going first, which I was very happy with. I absolutely swindled that after a lot of hard work, making him run in different directions for 4 turns. But it was so that was. But it's just certain missions and matchups. But this is where with your team comp, your understanding is really important. So that round we had Tom's down here. If we get these 3 up. And actually, because Tom's going to be down here anyway, so in that one, for example, I'm like, well, Death Guard doesn't look good on our Matrix. So I will just take it because I'm not good in this round anyway. So then it's gone. And then actually, we've got more of our good matchups coming through, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's having that sort of macro and joined up sense of how it works.
Yeah.
And going in very happy, right?
Oh, sure.
Got some love for teams. Zinth is saying teams feels like the natural way to play 40k competitive. I would say yes.
Yeah,
it's kind of meta proof to an extent, which singles isn't. And I think it's just more interesting. You end up with a wider range of things in play.
You've also got heroic moments where if you can lose a game and win your opponent, you could lose a game and you win the round for your team. Like, I got an 8 rather than a 4, baby. Yeah, we won the round. And it's that sort of mentality where you can have good moments from losing. It creates a much more positive mentality towards the game.
So. Completely. Peter Johnson was briefly asking what the difference between teams and singles is. So, Peter, just to catch you up to speed here, obviously the TLDR on this is that you have, in this case, 5 armies in your team. They have 5 armies. You can only have 1 of each. You've got a pairing system which determines which armies play into each other. And then ultimately the round is decided by the differential scoring game. So if one army beats another one by a huge amount, get more points. If it's close, it's a drawish, you both get points. And you're trying to leverage it so you get a couple of good results, don't have any disastrous ones, and get your win that way. Basically, that in broad is how it works. And then you've got 1 lighter board, 1 heavier board, and some medium boards to add like terrain complications, which the armies are choosing from as well.
Yeah,
that's the quick summary. We'll definitely make some more teams focused content this year. I think that's something that Chris and I were talking about. I'm sure Ed would be very happy to help with.
Very happy. With
it's really fun.
Even just showing how teams pairings work, I think it'd be really useful for people as well.
Yeah, we've got a lot of mind goblins turning up. Look at all these goblins in.
Yes, you won. Congratulations.
really well done to mind goblins.
Really well done.
I think it's they are obviously they were the top UKTC team last year. They pipped Ignite. They have an incredible bunch of players these days. There's just a bunch of guys I really like and get on with in that team, and I think there's some really nice lads. And I think I'm especially delighted. Obviously, I've been doing England prep stuff with Louis Baldington. I'm delighted for Louis because Louis worked incredibly hard this year, and I think that's a testament to him. But Johnny Simmons as well, like with his AdMech, it's just absolutely fantastic to see AdMech sort of pushing it all the way up there. And my Goblins should be very pleased with themselves. I'm a bit sad. I'm sad for Aiden's Mind Goblins B. It's a shame you guys didn't make it past. I was rooting for you guys. I thought you'd have them, but I was present at a very funny conversation at lunch where Don was just asking Aiden what was in his list and just trying to work out if he beats it or not. And it was like, you don't have to tell him, mate. Like, don't. I think I'm pretty sure they got a 10-10 anyway in the end, so it was fine.
Or Bridgehead Mirror.
Yeah. Jim Eccles says, I'd love to see a Getting Started series for teams. Yeah, I think that's something we can make. We'll 100% make that. I think we've got, we'll talk about it in a moment. We've got some exciting plans. I think making more teams content will only help to make it even harder for us to win teams events, which is just what we want, right? Russell asks, what's the best way to improve at pairings when you're new and have not played against everything? Where you start is you are starting by getting... I'd go round by round and getting a sense from your 5 players of those 5 armies out there, what would they say is good for them, what would they say is fine for them, and what would they say is bad for them. And starting on that basis, and what you are pairing to do is get as many of the good ones as you can and avoid as many of the bad ones as you can. And if you have that laid out in front of you, we use a matrix, you have a grid, and then you've got your good, bad, fine in there, and you can look at the different armies. You're sort of pairing to gradually remove the negatives, gradually secure the positives. And that, in short, is the ins and outs. I don't know if you've got any sort of entry-level advice there for Russell, Ed.
Entry-level advice is, if you're going to start playing teams with a group of people, make sure the people who are playing that, who are going into that team event and, that sort of thing, know their army
That is very important. Yeah.
If you're going to make a matrix for your first starting team events, the way you lose rounds, by the way, hint for everyone, is an inaccurate matrix. Like, if your matrix isn't correct, where someone thinks that they're going to get like an 8, but actually they're going to get 20 0'd, that's how you lose a round. Because if you don't know that, the other team probably does. If they know their team, if they know their armies, you don't. So if you wanted to go in entry level sort of thing, first of all, my recommendation would be go to team events, make the mistakes. That's how you do it, right? You have to go and play like some team events and get a feel for it and go, I just completely fucked this up. That's what don't do it. It's all these learning curves, right? So you go to team events, get the learning curves, and then understand how matrices work. Especially if we go through the starter series as well, we could show you how matrix are made and built. But also, a matrix is only ever as good as how accurate it is. Because you could have this beautiful looking matrix on Excel. It looks great. It's all conditional formatted. I know that word now. I'm becoming a professional with Excel. But ultimately, have all this stuff that looks fancy. But if all the information's wrong, it's completely useless, right? Because if you compare perfectly to what you've got on there and then lose the round. So my recommendation would be for entry level, have a group of people who know their armies, at least to a relatively good level, and then go off, play team events. They'll start to learn their matchups better and better. Practice games before team events is great to get a gauge to see what those pairings are actually like in theory. So you play the meta armies with your list and go, oh, this is probably going to be like, I should lose this by about 15 points. So it's probably going to be about 12 to 13 to win to them. So it's probably like an amber for me and all that sort of thing. You have to work out these things. And having the knowledge of having a good knowledge of pairings and how the scores are actually going to be is very important for an entry level.
This is very, very important. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but obviously
that's great.
Yeah, that's
the next step.
Games.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the key thing with this is to ask and get advice from as many people as you can as you play your armies and take that in.
Yeah,
I think one thing, it ends up really benefiting you in singles because it gets you in that habit of thinking about, well, how does what I'm playing go into the other main armies in the game? What does that actually look like? Which is ultimately a big skill in doing well in singles, right? Having a sense of what armies go into each other and how it happens.
Absolutely.
And then you can adapt accordingly to deal with those different things.
Yeah,
Russell in the chat says he played us at Clan Wars. That's awesome, Russell. Which team were you in? We really enjoyed Clan Wars. That was a really, really fun teams weekend for me then.
Oh yeah, I was on my Eldar again, wasn't I? Woo,
yeah, you were.
I had 2 Eldar mirrors. Whose idea was that?
You did. You were not a happy bunny. You were not a happy bunny.
I was happy as Larry. However, I wasn't excited about the pairing. I was like, oh, you're making me play a Wraith Knight in 3 Fire Prisms. Thanks, bro. Really appreciate that.
Alrighty, what we're going to do? Trash Bandits. Russell was on the Trash Bandits team with the lovely
Eldar mirrors.
Fantastic. It was a real pleasure to meet you, Russell. And so we Trash Bandits was a really lovely round.
Yeah, it was a great round.
And we enjoyed chatting with you guys at dinner on the Saturday night as well.
Yeah, we did.
Scrivo's in the chat. Hi, Scrivo.
Mr. Scrivo.
Scrivo, who's obviously been doing a great job on these water cooler gossips, wasn't at the ITT because he had other very important real life commitments. So he'll be on. He'll be on again very soon to chat.
Shout out to Scrivo. I made Legion of the Damned Army, right? And I was like, this is going to be really cool. We've got little flamey heads and everything. Brilliant. And Scrivo does our pairing cards, which look incredible.
He does.
They look incredible every time. Mine's upstairs, otherwise I go get it.
I'll grab one. I've got my GSC one here.
So basically, I said I wasn't going to do Legion of the Damned. And then there you go. There's Tom's GSC one. And Scrivo was like, brilliant. I'll just make yours Legion of the Damned. I was like, amazing. Amazing. So I have a little pairing card with Legion of the Damned on it.
So good.
Just fantastic.
We had 20 players there, right? And Scrivo made a hand-drawn, coloured pairings card with a character for every single person there.
And they look fantastic.
Just beautiful. Absolute dedication. I mean, he's a very talented artist. He can crack these out, but that's still above and beyond. And it's really fun in pairings when you've got the nice artwork. And
it's great. It's great. I like the idea of people having the printed off ones, but I just like the artwork ones. It's more personalised.
Yeah, exactly. It's really. I keep all of mine in my wallet now, so I've got like 3 that Scrivo's drawn from different events. They're really cool. They're really cool.
I've got my Eldar one. It's great. It's my avatar.
All right, guys. So that's the kind of the in and around of it. What we will do now is move to thinking about what the lessons here were for the UK meta and perhaps the teams meta more broadly. Before we do that, Ed's got some exciting things to talk about because Ed is going to be joining us, stepping forward into some of our ventures in terms of the coaching and mentoring. Perhaps you want to unpack that a little bit, Edward. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk to you about it a little bit. So I've run my events. So that's what I'll be doing that as usual. It's going to be one event a month from April going forward. There are 100 bands are in Cardiff. It's exciting. They have 100 man in April sold out. We use WTC terrain, and it's the usual pairing. You do the usual pairing sort of thing. So it's very mirrored to WTC. Which is awesome. But the big thing is I'm joining 6++ with the coaching. So I will be...
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be awesome. So I'm basically going to be jumping into a coaching role with the 6++ guys. So my coaching is going to be basically the same setup as everyone else. You have to become a member of the channel and all that sort of thing. And I will have a diary that you can book time and let me teach you 40K. It's going to be awesome. So effectively, I'll be able to... I think I've played most armies in the game at this stage.
Ed's one of those brains who can do whatever you need him to work out. He'll work it out.
And I can do practice games. I can do another thing that we've been looking at is doing if you take photos at the end of each turns of your games throughout the process, we can book an hour or something like that to go through those situations and go through the interactions of the game. Maybe a mistake that you might have made that I can cover and show, and then bring it up on TTS and show you an example of how to do it better instead. And we can do all these sorts of things with you guys. So I'm really excited to be joining the coaching team. I'll be doing I'm now open to be booked effectively. Yeah. So I'm working nights at the moment, but I'll be leaving my job in a couple of months. But I can't imagine I'll have more than like 5 or 6 people for the first couple of months, unless you guys in flood my inbox.
Unless they come flying.
Then I'll just hand in my notes tomorrow, right? It's going to be fine. So,
Yeah.
But effectively, guys, I'll be doing the coaching. I'll be able to be booked out as same as Tom. I'll be able to give everyone a progress log in the Discord, and so that's the big announcement today, isn't it, Tom? So that's
the big news. I'm massively excited for it. I think Ed is someone who helps me become a better 40k player all the time. So I would say I can't speak highly enough. Can't speak highly enough for him, and he's a lovely person to work with. He's also quite unique mind in 40k for fun concepts and ideas. So I think if he's someone who you like the list he's putting out, you like you're very impressed with what he's been achieving with his Eldar, his Anvil Siege Force. We've got a video coming out later this week about Anvil Siege Force as well, so we'll give you the lowdown on that.
Yeah,
but if he's something you'd love to work with, then he will be available. And as I say, I can't recommend him enough. He's wonderful. So it's going to be really, really fun. So obviously, to go alongside that, do hit the old like and subscribe, guys.
Yes.
If you want to sign up and be a YouTube member, we're going big with the channel this year. We've got big ambitions. And we're on our way to 100 members. We'd love to hit that quite soon. Yeah. So you guys can help us get there. And so we're very excited to have Ed along for the ride. Going to be a lot of fun. And Josh says, seconded, Ed is annoyingly hard to beat and fun to learn from. This is the thing. You always learn something with Ed, and he's got an incredible eye for detail with all the little things that make a really good 40k player. So I think it's well worth looking into, guys, if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So I'll put my name in the Discord, my Discord name in at the in the description, and put a link to our Discord. So you guys can find it and contact us and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly that. And we're going to have the website coming up soon, and we're going to have all some nice graphics and stuff to just make it nice and clear for all of you, and you can come find us there. But a very, very exciting future ahead.
Awesome.
Alrighty, Bonsai Kitty Gaming's in the chat. Hello, Bonsai Kitty Gaming. Love to have you here.
Fantastic.
Love to see so many of our YouTube members here. That's fantastic. Jack Davis Fletcher in the chat said, "I miss getting 8/12 so Ed can get 20s, mate. That's my whole life. That's my whole job."
Jack did it for one event, and he was like,
"I feel like I sometimes we'll be in a round. I'm like, this is how central defensive midfielders feel." as Ed is running around scoring wonder goals at the front, I'm just.
It's a football reference, isn't it?
Just slugging away, doing my tackles. Doesn't.
I was first defender. I tried to get back.
You were first defender.
I really did.
Yeah, we were using first defender in a slightly different way at this event, but we'll get into that. I mean, let's take it there now, right? If we're thinking about. Let's talk about the overall team's meta and what our sort of big lessons were about approach and armies and the meta going out this weekend, because there was tons, wasn't there? There was a ton of learning. I mean, I'll let you take it away first. But in terms of what would you say some of your main takeaways about how the team's game is shaping up in the UK are, having had time to digest it after the weekend?
Sure. So I think the team's game in general is it's escalating into a lot like all of the lists that you have to try and get good pairings into is really hard because the meta has just been very stable. So you basically have to focus on, at that point, you have to focus on skews, right? So you look at skews that lie within your team that if you look at with an average build of an army, they go, oh, no, I can't kill that. Like my Eldar. Like the Eldar was an example of that. It was a skew with the Wraith Iron Avatar with toughness 12. Not everything can kill toughness 12, and you just run at them, okay? But that theory works for a lot of things throughout the meta right now. So the Death Guard, there's a big wake-up call for me. I was like, I looked at the Death Guard list with all the tanks and like Nathan's list. Absolutely fantastic, this Nathan's list.
It's
I really like Aiden's as well. I like
Aiden's was very good.
I like Aiden's little idiot that goes 9
He's got his little contagion aura idiot. It's beautiful tech.
Y'all smell now.
I
love that guy. I love the little idiot that does that. I think that's what I'm thinking right now towards it. I know that's always been the case with teams. Like, it's always been the case, right, where you want to have a skew list somewhere to do better into something else. But it's become even more prevalent now. Because at the start of 10th, let's say, everyone's like, oh, we'll have an Eldar player. We'll have a GSC player. There's 2 big wins. Yay. And it doesn't work like that anymore. Because you don't just have, like, a broken as else thing that just goes, all right, they'll just win every game.
Yes.
You have strong lists, but even then, those strong lists don't still struggle to 20-0 certain things if they get blunted in the correct way by the opposing team. So that's where my view is, where the meta is right now for teams. I think it's very much so, very stable, very hard to beat teams, which means you need to have your team comp very correct, which I think we didn't quite have.
No, not quite. I think that's right.
We were close.
We were close. Okay, I think, and it's something we thought about last time, I think the feeling is often that you want to be able to flex between a couple of options that will happily play on the light board. You want to have 2 lists that can do that because, even if you have a good light board list, it is very common now for another team to have 2 things that will happily run at that. I mean, for us, right, we know if Tau goes on a light board, Bile or GSC, they can handle it, right? They can do the things they need to do and manage it. It's fine.
Mm.
And so you need a second option that actually problematizes one of those lists. So let's say their comp has Tau and a Death Guard shooty list. Suddenly I'm like, I'm not very good into the Death Guard shooty list, and neither is Bile. So it's being able to switch up between those, having good pins for lightboard defenders, having options in case they have pins for yours.
Yeah.
I think is really important. And as Ed says, we've seen skew. There's a lot of very infantry all-in armies. So, Brood Surge, Bile. The Guard list is really an infantry all-in. We saw Host of Ascension GSC was out this weekend. There's a bunch of go wide infantry lists.
Yeah.
And there are much more mech-heavy ones or monster-heavy ones. The Nids is still a thing. Slaanesh Demons we'll get to in a moment because that one seems to be doing quite a lot of work in the event as well. Yeah. Quickly shout out One's Like a Game who's given us a super chat asking thoughts on triple Pred Destructors and the Thunderstrike. Now, I believe Louis had that in his list, which went all the way up to the final and won.
I can't argue with Louis' result.
Yeah.
And he beat the Marine Mirror, so...
Yeah. I can't remember exactly what it is the Thunderstrike gets you. Is that +1 to wound? Is that
plus 1 AP, I believe.
It's +1 AP. So that obviously, very big deal on those tanks.
Either +1 AP or ignore cover. Basically the same thing, I think.
And Louis' list is worth a little shout out because it's a sort of half a Blood Angels MSU combat list, and it's half a Marine tank skew. Right, it's both those things, and because he's chosen quite carefully. New Oaths is obviously so good that the tanks will all just be good because you've got New Oaths, but then you've also got LAG, Liberation Assault Group, buffing the tiny cheap melee units, so they all punch well above their weight if you need them to. In terms of being able to advance and charge, in terms of all the buffs they can get, etc. So I thought that was a really beautifully designed list for the boards that he was playing on.
BA non-BA was my second choice.
Yeah.
So that my BA non-BA with guns was my second choice. The only reason why I went for, because as you just said, with all of the infantry like heavy lists coming around on, so then 20 core Death Corps Creep bricks and stuff like that. I basically decided Desolators are a vibe in that sort of environment. Absolutely. So you basically push really hard into those certain matchups. Like against GSC, what do you do unless you're letting them come down and shoot you? You need to have a way to lift a quicker turn, and that's the same with a lot of different armies right now. You need to have a way to kill a unit turn reliably. So I really liked his list, Lewis. It was really good.
Yeah, no, I thought it was nice. It blended the two. I felt like a few of those early BA lists didn't quite have the balance right between the little combat units and some heft, and having he basically had 6 tanks right backing that up. That's a lot of output with New Oaths in the background. Flexible because the ballistas can target one thing, Preds can target something else.
Yeah,
and then those little combat units that punch up. It was really, really nicely done.
Yeah.
We've got a comment from BCG Cypher. Says DG Death Guard felt like the bully in the pairings at this event. No one wanted to face them. We certainly felt that. We certainly in our
small win. Everyone else was like, no.
It was bad. I think it's interesting. Death Guard are having a fantastic time in the UK. I think they really like UKTC boards as a default. Those combat type Death Shroud lists, for example, right? Those are just good on a lot of the UKTC maps because they can basically be hidden in the nice ruins, then all on the points, and it's go time, and that's what they want. But then the very skewy, shooty Death Guard lists like Aiden and Nathan were running feel very good into some of the other meta things as well because they've got a lot of heft. They can absorb those early waves of pressure on bloat drones and then hit you with the real stuff. Mortarian is also just there, which is a real problem for certain armies as well.
Yeah, a lot of people find out. A lot of people find out Mortarian turns out is the best model in the game if you pass all your 4-ups and 5-ups.
Yeah, he's unstoppable if he makes a save. Unreal, right? And I was going to say, I think I like the icon bearer. So Aiden says that's his tech piece to win the mirror. That's cool. Yeah, I think it's cool. I've having tried that list a few times. I've definitely found that getting the contagion reach where you need it is important, and he's obviously a fantastic tool for that. And I think it just gives you one more little action piece as well, doesn't he? Which is quite nice because the tank list can get a bit low on action pieces. So I think it's Death Guard definitely emerged as one of the big winners. I mean, Slaanesh was also out there, although I don't think either of our finalists brought Slaanesh. And I don't think Ignite had it. So Slaanesh, we had another example of the meta currently. It's so stable that even something I think was almost universally agreed is very, very good going into this event, which was Slaanesh Demons. It isn't essential. It wasn't essential. You didn't have to have it. What you did have to have was answers to it, things that could hold it up or beat it, right?
Mm.
I don't know how you feel about Sinesh Demons coming out of this, Ed. Was that a UK terrain thing? Or I mean, I know Liam VSL was on it and was dominating. We did see some good players. Greg Chamberlain was running Sinesh as well. Danny Porter was running it.
Yeah.
Is that a must-have in the team's meta?
In 8s, yes, because it's the
in
pressure.
8s, yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's the same whenever you got on a list that's really, really good. If you compare around it and give it have answers to it, by putting a little bit of tech pieces into people's lists, or if they want to attack with it, have two to go second defender with it to try and get a big win, have two things to go down to it if it exists, then I don't think it's necessary. I think they're very strong. Probably one of the best armies in the game right now, if not the best army in the game right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can build it into them, like a bit of it, like some good indirect. They hate.
Yeah, exactly indirect.
That. And as long as you have a way to either stop keepers from doing their thing or killing them, like you move blocks, or like Admech can just keep them away with 1,000 trash units and stuff like that, you're generally speaking okay, I think. But
100%.
That's my opinion. I think they're very strong. I think they win most of the games they go into. However, by how much, don't know. Because it's a pure combat pressure army that can get stopped. And as soon as you get stopped, you're not getting a big win.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's the thing.
Yeah,
and it's probably one of the more known entities now in terms of people being aware of its power. So I guess that always makes life a little bit harder. But yeah, very, very powerful. Maybe not quite as much in fires, but it was obviously still out there taking names and causing all kinds of havoc.
It's annoying.
I think it's interesting. It's worth returning to indirect because I suppose we're probably living through what I'm going to refer to as a tasteful indirect meta. Okay, we're not talking about so much of it that it is the entire game, except maybe Ed's, but we'll do our own video. We'll do our own video on Ed's. That'll be coming out soon. Don't worry if you want to learn all about Ed's wonderful indirect tech in Anvil Siege Force. But it's fair to say a lot of the teams this were packing like a chunk of indirect, right? We had the Guard list, chunk of indirect. Yeah, Death Guard, chunk of indirect. Marines, often chunk of indirect. And it's not that we're seeing so much of it that it completely warps everything, but I think a lot of armies in the game, I guess, need to be dealt with by having some. And again, my own GSC are a good example, right? Once you've got a bit of indirect, that does change the tempo of the game. It does slightly shave off the differentials. And Mike Costello had it in our game, and I wouldn't say it stopped him losing the game, but it definitely made it harder for me in terms of losing certain units when I didn't want to and different things. Yeah, I don't know how you feel about that.
I think indirect is in a healthy spot, to be honest.
I would agree.
Yeah, you've got certain things that are a bit nuts with the interactions, but even when they're nuts, they're not crazy. I think guard indirect is annoying still, especially in combined regiment when you have the Fields of Fire, because the AP still works on them, so you can have AP2 2d6 shots from the mortars at damage 2. That is annoying for Marines. But apart from that, it all seems relatively stable and healthy, right? There's nothing in there that goes, you have indirect, I lose, and unless it's from a matchup perspective. If you're an army that specifically hates indirect, then fine. But it's not like there's an indirect it's not like there's indirect pieces out there that just auto win you games, right? Which is it's about as healthy as indirect can get.
I completely agree. Yeah, and what I guess it does is it slightly evens the scales, right? A lot of hide behind walls armies basically get to set the tempo of the game all game, and indirect says you're not going to get to set the tempo of the game all game because actually I'm occasionally going to be picking things off, and actually I get to also say what's happening. So we're perhaps for the first time living through an era where it feels like the balance between those two ways of playing is relatively happy, rather than completely skewed one way or the other.
I think so.
So that's certainly good. If we're thinking about the surprise factors, obviously we've talked about, I think Orcs were out in force, and we saw Brian Sipe absolutely demolishing people with tactical. I know Tom Green had a very good run with tactical. Mm-hmm. But any other, I think that the tactical brigade was obviously very, very strong and was out there in large numbers. Were there any other armies that we were sort of surprised by? Anything else that we saw that we weren't necessarily expecting?
Nothing that really the Death Guard, I suppose, that surprised me.
Yeah, I think Death Guard, the amount of it was a bit of a surprise.
I think it's the amount of it and the type of list that surprised me, I think, just because I haven't really thought about Death Guard very much. But I looked at the list and went, oh, yeah, that works. Why the hell, why on earth didn't I think of this? Mainly because I don't play Death Guard. But, still. But yeah, I think anything else that surprised me out in force? Not really.
Got a shout out in the chat for Box Custodies. I think Custodies probably have a reasonable shout. Yeah. I think there was a decent amount of Custodies. And I think what was interesting was that I think probably the most successful custodians lists were not the dread skew, right? I think everyone was necessarily, people were probably expecting the spearhead to be the thing.
Yeah.
But actually, custodians were out there in force. And it just seems like they probably have solid game into a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't say they're there to end lives, although Box certainly was. And I think they were pairing him. They were pairing him to take heads, and he was doing a great job with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think they were one of those armies where they can give the pressure armies a good game because ultimately custodians are a defensive melee army, which makes complete sense. And then they're tough enough with high enough OC and enough threat that gun lines have to be very careful into them, which probably stops them pushing the higher scores a lot of the time. So that's probably why custodians were there in force.
Yeah, so.
But yeah, I think so they were definitely an interesting one. I think Aiden's saying Votan in the final. So actually, for me, Votan's an interesting one. I feel like Votan are quite stable. I think Votan are one of those armies that have a lot of stuff, shoot well, are durable. If you push them, they will shoot you a hell of a lot. So unless you're a certain kind of profile, it's quite hard to push them. In my experience, I had a game with Greg Chamberlain that I think was a 10-10 at Nottingham. Obviously, I came out the right side of that, but it blunts GSC, right? Again, that's a useful thing to have if you've got a sort of durability in shooting that blunts GSC. And Votan in teams are always good fun because quite a lot of teams like to stat check, and then Votan just slap their judgment tokens on the stat check and go pew, 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 and hoover it up. Now, does that make them one of the strongest armies in the game? I wouldn't say so, but I think they have their little role in a team comp, and I think they rarely like get completely blown out if played well. I think they can dig in and be tough to beat. So I guess that makes sense.
That's a good point. Actually. That's a good point. I just saw Aiden mentioned the Death Watch. I think that's a good point. Actually, there was many Death Watch.
Yes, Death Watch completely in absence.
I think the reason for that though is mainly because you've just got such consistency from like Ultramarine and Gulliman, and it's more of a Ultramarines, Gulliman, and Calgar combo like Josh Roberts list with Gladius. Mainly because number one, everyone knows how to use Gladius. There's not an unknown factor. You can have players who haven't haven't picked up Marines in a while can pick it up and play it because it's an attachment that's been out for ages. So I think that's probably why you haven't seen much Death Watch, just because you've got a really strong list with lots of tanks and it's a skew good in teams that can choose their pairings and go down as first defender and do their thing.
Completely,
which makes a big difference to how good they are. Right, I think that's where I'm at.
Death Watch are in a category with a bunch of armies that are hard working teams because they're delicate and they need to be played really well, or they collapse. And we've literally just had a shout out for Reaper's Wager and Weird Eldari skews, which is a similar thing, right? Ultimately, it's a Grey Knights I'd put in this category as well. They're armies that when they can do their thing, they're very good, but they're vulnerable to anything that shuts down the way they want to play, and if they do get shut down, they can lose big, and losing big is obviously a real issue in a team's environment, right? You don't want those lists. And this is something we refer to pairing princesses. There's a pairing princess.
I was Lee this weekend,
but pairing princess, I think you can usually carry one list that has specific things it likes and specific things it doesn't. But the more you have, the harder it gets. I mean, so one example from our weekend, we played against the lovely lads of Trash War Gaming. Love those guys. They're great. But they had both Alex Fowler's Thousand Suns and Ben Pierce was running the Wraith Knight list.
Yeah.
That's two lists that need to be quite carefully managed and probably dislike similar things at the end of the day. Like, they have similar kinds of issues with the unit count and the asset loss collapse problem if they get the wrong situation. We had this a little bit with me and Harley, where we were both playing sort of trash melee. Trash melee, I think, is a fair description, right? And it's like ultimately, trash melee is good into certain things, and then it doesn't like other things. And me and Harley were finding the same lists. We're both looking like, I don't want to play the Custodes. I don't want to play the Death Guard. Like certain real man's combat armies that are like, I will bounce you, son.
We have saves, bro.
Like, no, not the saves, not the 2-up saves. And I think in any team comp, and this is our learning as always, you can have one of those. You can maybe even have two of those sorts of things. But you don't want them to be the same.
Yeah,
because then you can cover different angles. And B, you need to have a very solid base of lists that just will go and do their thing in another way. I mean, having solid players who are going to do their thing, that's a start point as well. And we certainly had that.
We have some good.
We avoided any serious issues on that score. But I think that was definitely big takeaways. And again, I think if we look at the lists, let's just refer back to the final. I think the final's great data, right? So if you look at the list we had, you've got GSC on one side. GSC, very good floor, right? Even when it loses, it will score well. And Votan's similar thing.
Yeah.
Space Marines, solid, chunky lists on both sides. Custodes, Orcs, loads of stuff on the Orc side, very, very chunky and tough on the Custodes side. Mm-hmm. Guard Mechanicus, horde stuff, like loads of vehicles and loads of bodies. Death Guard, Astra Militarum. And so in every single one of those, there's nothing too clever about it, right? The most, obviously the AdMech can be brain intensive. The Guard does have a bit of finesse in the uppy downing and everything else, but
it does,
at their cores, all of these lists are chunky and stable with a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's really important in the current meta, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is important. Sorry, my cat's going mental. But yeah,
that's fine.
it is very important in the current meta. I think that both the teams are a statement to having a stable baseline that can have a couple of things to do the first defending thing.
Yeah,
and then do whatever you need to do with your other pairings to try and get big wins. Like I think the most people have been going first defending Marines because why not? They're just good.
Yeah,
like
Marines are in a really healthy spot, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I've seen from the Space Marine players that have been getting good scores is not many people who have figured out two attackers that are going to be able to blunt that. Well, they have, but one's going to have to first defend.
Yes, and that's your issue, right? It's like this is the thing. It's like
there's not two things that consistently blunt Marines, or people haven't cracked it yet in fives. I don't think because I didn't feel like anyone could blunt me all weekend, and that's not me being cocky. Sure. It's just down to list. Do you know what I mean? My matrix was always like 4 yellows and a green, 4 yellows and a green, 4 yellows and a green, or then Death Guard was there as well. All right, 3 yellows, a green, and a black.
Completely.
And then you're like, okay, I just won't take the Death Guard, but that's their first defender. This is what I mean. It's really hard to blunt the Marines in a meaningful way.
I think those kinds of early put down lists are actually maybe a little bit. There's less of those going that work than there are the later pairing sneaky. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of if I get paired X, Y, Z, and the moon's in the right direction and the board's at the right angle, I can do this. There are a lot less out there that are just going to go down and be a menace at the moment. That can hang with, let's say, your Marines lists, your shooty Marines lists.
Yeah,
there's a shout out in the chat. There's a very relevant shout out from Klaus Backham in the chat about Star Shatter.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe people will stop running Star Shatter and go back to chunky and stable with many things instead with Necrons. I would agree. I think it'd be interesting if Necrons went back in the direction of the Wraiths and the durability, Awakened Dynasty or Canoptech Court. And I hate playing against those lists, but in a team sense, Star Shatter, from what we've seen, A, not making many top comps, B, very vulnerable to getting blown out by a pressure list. That's the builds we've seen. And we're all shouting about it like it was going to be the biggest, most powerful army in the game. That's not emerged. Obviously, they took some nerfs straight out the game. But actually, actually, I think Star Shatter, a little bit like Bringers of Flame before it, just has points of vulnerability. That, it shoots real good, but if it gets connected in too hard by a bunch of things, it has a sad time. And so that was perhaps another one that maybe wasn't as dominant as we were expecting it would be.
Yeah, I don't think I expected it to be a very dominant when I first saw these attachments. Obviously, you've just got like 6 amazing strats, a really good attachment ability, and then you realize it's Necrons. You know what I mean. If you're building like 8 Necron vehicles, it'll be good in some matchups, sure. But you know what else is going to happen? People are going to run at you. Like they are. They're just going to run at your ass. Like that's what I do. I'm like, I've got 2 up saves and vindicators. It's fine. It'll be fine. Just run at you. It's fine. I survive 1 activation of a DDA. The other one rolls a 1. We're fine. I kill 3 DDAs and we charge everything. It's all good.
100%.
Not that actually happens on average, guys. Don't try this at home. But it can work. Like there's a lot of lists out there that if you just rush Necrons, they can't kill you. Especially if you tag them in the wrong place, but then they can't fall back and shoot and charge. Or fall back and shoot, especially now that you can't. It's declared at the start of the movement phase, not like I'm going to fall back. I'm going to make that fall back. Those changes are pretty healthy, I think.
Yeah.
Because a fall back and shoot aura that doesn't have to be there at the start of the movement phase is super annoying. Like it's just like there's enhancement. It's only like an 8-inch move guy, so I'll just go. Meh. I'll move over and do it. It's just awkward and annoying. But yeah, I think Star Shatter is not going to be as prevalent. In 8s, I think they'll be there just because they can.
I think Necrons. I mean, the book had so many different things going on. I'll be very surprised if someone doesn't retool Necrons in an interesting way. I just feel like there's a retooling required to deal with the current needs.
I think you go back to big things and stat check. I think that's kind of what I would do. I think I would go for 6 Wraiths, 3 Technomancers, go for that sort of build. But in teams anyway. Just if you wanted something stable, right? You're not going to push big wins with it, are you? But you are going to do is go, I have 18 Wraiths. If you're an army that can't kill 18 Wraiths, then I'm going to get at least 10 out of you. And that's the theory, right? So I think it's one of those things that you pair it for. Not blunting the top armies because of Vindicate exists, but like but I think they can definitely hang out with a lot of the not top armies that
exactly, which throws things off further down the pairings, right?
For sure.
If I guess we're looking ahead in some ways, I think the interesting thing now will be the impact of Guard and Eldar, right? I think those are both going to come in, and by the time we next have an ITT, we'll have Guard and Eldari in play. I think that is hopefully going to mix up some of the things. We were just talking about, I guess, attackers. Eldar are historically one of the attacker lists of the game. Guard with a bit more flexibility to build in different directions can also throw up some interesting things. I think for teams, it's not going to be hopefully won't just be Bridgehead.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think by the time we're next at an ITT, it will all have changed again. I don't know what your thoughts going into it now are, Ed, or if you think we need to see it all take shape.
It'll be different again, won't it?
Yeah.
Josh, the absolute madman with his goddamn balanced data slates, he's doing a great job.
Yeah, 100%.
He's doing a great job, and we love him for it. However, it changes every time. Like, look at the Marines. Like, yes, the +1 to wound on Ultramarines may be a bit much, but look at what they've done with the rest of the Marine factions. You've got people enjoying like sub factions of Marines that no one ever likes. You've got like OC3. Yeah. Your OC3 like heavy intercessors with Ferros. You got OC2 intercessors with Shrike.
Yeah.
What other examples are? Pedro Cantor like his Stern God OC2. Cool as hell. Cool as hell.
So cool. Yeah.
So I still think that there's I still think that there's lots of like good things that are going to be around the corner.
Sort of a whole Pandora's box has been opened, basically, right?
And I think at the moment, what some people do is look at things like when I was looking at Siege Anvil a while ago. Before I was using it, I was like, at some point, this will be good. These strats, these strats are really good. The detachment rule is solid. It's fine. So at some point, it's going to be good. But I think a lot of people have armies like that, where like one data slate around the corner, suddenly like, oh, this is good again. Amazing, let's go. So I think next time it'll just be completely different. It's going to be really cool, as usual.
100%. Yeah, fantastic. All right, I think that for today is us because me and Ed have other videos we plan to make today. So we've got some important secrets from Ed's list and tech and run at the weekend to spill. So thanks so much all for tuning in. Amazing to have so many of you here. Once again, very well done to everyone at ITT. It was amazing to play so many of you. Well done to Vanguard Tactics for making the final and beating us along the way. Well done to Mind Goblins for winning it. And again, as Zach himself said at the awards, well done to just the huge, happy, healthy community we have. So exciting, so much chat, so many stories, and just such a vibrant scene that is now growing at such a rate that we're putting up the biggest events in the entire world, right, for teams. I just think that's amazing. The direction of travel is so exciting. I think we should all be really, really happy about building something people want to be part of. And let's keep it that way, right? Let's absolutely keep it that way. Let's keep making it a place people are really excited to come into and join and play, and teams will grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, and you guys have done that yourselves as well. It's incredible. Like as Tom said, 5 amazing teams on the way. Like we've had none of us. We all had absolutely fantastic games. The community as a whole has just become so much more healthy and so much more supportive. And we always love your support. And thanks for watching the stream. And I'll leave Tom to do his own thing because he loves to sign off.
Oh, I do love to sign off.
You do.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate that.
All right,
it's been a lot of fun.
You got scared for a second, didn't you? You were like, "Is this guy going to say bye?"
Someone that's my inner control freak is like,
does
Ed think he can end my stream? I will end him.
That's why I was like, "Thanks for this."
You know what? Ed's edited it. It's all good. It's perfect. I'll let him have it. He's earned it. He's earned it like the champagne he got after round 5 yesterday as well.
Delicious.
All right, guys. We'll see you again very soon. Lots of love. Bye-bye.